Now, African economies are at a pivotal juncture, and the current focus is to help unlock financing for continent's development goals. High public debt levels and the uncertain outlook for international aid limit the scope for growth. Now, the private sector will have to play more of a role in economic development if countries are to enjoy a strong recovery and avoid economic stagnation. Benson Adenuga, Head of Office and Coverage Director of Nigeria British International Investment, joins us. Good afternoon, sir. It's good to have you on the program.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon.
Now, development finance institutions are increasing their coverage of Africa. How do they encourage greater private sector participation of investors in Africa, saying that it's a bit lacking? And why is this important?
Thank you very much, Will. It's very important because of the enormity of development challenges facing us in Africa. To give you an example, last year, MBS indicated that 133 million Nigerians are multidimensionally poor. In addition to that, if you look at the amount African countries require to meet the green assets objective that they have, is over 130 billion. This is why this is very important. In terms of what DFIs do to mobilize the private sector, first of all, we are counter-cyclical investors, which means that when things are difficult, we continue to invest. We don't run out of the continent. That is the first point. The second thing we do is really by establishing platforms that enable us to be able to mobilize others to invest in the market, looking at the pioneering investments that we have made in our continent.
So you've talked about the urgency of this. Why is it in particular, what makes it more urgent? You talked about the poverty levels. Why is it so urgent for Africa to get it right?
It's very important for Africa because if we don't address these issues in Africa, you have seen the number of people who are sick, who are poor, and the inability of our governments to be able to single-handedly address all these issues make it particularly important. I think this is where the urgency is from. And when you look at the implications on the large population we have in Africa, it's making it even more urgent for us to act.
So with new ways to finance, we're seeing impact projects coming into the continent. What other, how do we align this with stakeholders' interest? How do we make sure that stakeholders come in and they also benefit from this investment and not just come into Africa and maybe not making returns as they wish?
I think the important point is to ensure that we recognize the objectives of the various type of investors we have. And we design investment platforms that ensure that we are able to mobilize those various types of investors to come into our market. To give you an example, BII invested $75 million in green basket bonds to ensure that we can invest in creating green assets through SMEs. Now, such a vehicle will attract investors with a focus on climate finance. In addition to that, we've invested $10 million in the SDG Outcome Fund. And what that does is to mobilize investors who are able to put money or willing to put money into impact bonds. By the time we have those specialized vehicles, it brings in different categories of investors who are able to bring funds into our market and ensure that there is increase in the amount of funding available in our markets.
You mentioned this clean energy, more like sustainable energy type of investment. Are there other kinds of investment platforms that you would want to share that investors probably who are interested will want to come in and be a part of?
Indeed, Will. If you look at our market, you will see that the SME segment is the largest employer of labor and contributor to GDP in our market. And as BII, we have invested in different vehicles to ensure that we demonstrate the viability of the segment. To give you one practical example, in Nigeria, BII invested $100 million in First Bank of Nigeria. That funding is for on lending to SMEs, and 30% of it is earmarked for women-owned businesses. Now, that is a platform that we use to demonstrate support to the SME space. And we can, through that, bring other investors into this space to work with us, to enable us to be able to do. That's one example. The other example is the financial space, where as BII, we have been investing through venture capital funds that provide financing to early stage businesses. In addition to that, we also put money directly into those DFS companies to ensure that they are able to operate from early stage to growth stage and then support the most vulnerable and small businesses and individual and households in our community. If you look at those two, it really helps to improve the level of funding available to support development in Nigeria and in Africa.
Thank you so much, Mr. Benson Adenuga. We do hope that these projects and investments, achieve the impact that they are destined or they are being deployed to achieve. Thank you so much, Corporate Director of Nigeria British International Investment, for sharing your thoughts on the program.
Thank you very much.